welcome back to another segment of the AFCA staff meeting. Once again, I'm joined with our executive director and former head coach, longtime football coach, Todd Berry. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, Mario, and excited about getting back in here and working in our new studio. I think this is something that is that we're very, very excited about in terms of exploring all the options that we had and have now. And last week in our last series, we kind of put together this whole concept of being able to really create thousands of formations with very little verbiage. And again, that was one of my frustrations as we talked last week about how we could get into provide as much flexibility as we could, but do it to where it was easy for our players so that all of our players could learn it, regardless whether you were an incoming freshman or junior college transfer, and that we could plug them in. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can take those. Again, we never ran thousands of formations.
Right.
But in the same sense, too, we wanted that to carry forward year to year to where we weren't ever in a situation to where we were basically having to make anything up. It was something that was already built in. And so what we thought we'd do today is kind of walk through how we basically did play calling from an offensive standpoint. And again, I don't think anybody needs to, you could do this in the wishbone or whatever offense you're in. It's more the infrastructure part rather than trying to sell the offensive style.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned you built that, the first part, what we talked about last week, the formations and the flexibility, kind of off frustration of things that you dealt with in the past, and maybe even some mistakes you might have made as an offensive coordinator. And once again, as we look at this packaging of these different offensive schemes here, I would love to kind of hear maybe some of the frustrations that led to wanting to compartmentalize plays like this.
Yeah, last week we kind of talked about the frustration with formations and that we were so limited based off of our calls that we could not get into formations. Well, the same thing is going to apply today in terms of play calling. And we wanted something that would be easy for our players. But again, if you're an option team, it doesn't really make any difference what you are. It's kind of about providing the infrastructure or the system that allows for this really easy communication. You're going to find, just like last week in the formation part and the personnel part, how compartmentalized things were that allowed us to get, again, hundreds, thousands of different plays. But the players were really only learning about 8 or 9 different concepts, and that we kept that verbiage very, very small. As you know, we talked last week about making sure that everything was one syllable. And actually that goes back to Johnny Majors whenever I worked with him, and Coach Majors at Tennessee was so adamant about everything being very efficient. And that's part of the reason I have a lot of him in me, I think, in relation to trying to be efficient with things. And, so we would look in the dictionary for all the one syllable words that were, descriptive or acronym or something along those lines. And so, we're going to apply that today in terms of this play calling. And hopefully, I think we always kind of heard from, especially coaches that came in and coached with us, just they were amazed at how much we could do and how easy the system was to learn. And I know that many of our coaches probably get frustrated in transitions, as I did, with, does that really make an awful lot of sense? And so we're going to, ours was numeric. And the reason why we went numeric over words was we felt like that even though we had some descriptor words that we could attach to these and our players understood, we wanted to make sure that we at least had the ability to audible to a play, and we needed ways to make sure that we could do that in a really clean fashion so that it was our players knew what was going on, but we could disguise that play. And so I think that's why we went numeric.
That's awesome, Coach. Well, I'm super excited about diving into this. And as we do, once again, as Coach mentioned, this isn't for you to say, hey, you should be running these plays per se. This is for you to say, this is a great way for me to think about how I'm putting this on the plate for my student athlete, allowing for them to be as effective as possible with this as least amount of thinking as possible. And so as we get ready to go here, Coach, you mentioned this numeric system, and we got them all drawn up here on the board. We're going to make sure to throw some slides up for you as well to make it easier for you to keep up as you're listening along with us. But we're going to start right at the number 0, and this is going to go 0 all the way up to 900. Don't be overwhelmed because it's going to make a lot of sense as we piece this together. But our first series that we're going to kind of talk about, our first scheme series combination that we're going to talk about is the screen game, and that goes from 0 to 9, and talk about. This is probably a good opportunity to maybe talk about the whole foundation of even and odd, and how you have 5 schemes per 5 different plays per scheme, and all those fine details. So, Coach, if you want to get rolling on screens, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We were like most people, I think, in the sense that our even numbers were to our right and our odd numbers were to the left, and they expanded out as you move further away from the ball. And so, obviously, the closer to the ball you were, then you were in a lower number. And if you were 8 or 9, then that meant that play or that gap was extensively wide. And we wanted to have abilities to be able to communicate, to be able to say this from a no huddle system. And not that you have to, but each one of these schemes, as you mentioned, from 0 to 9 is basically going to be screenplays for us. And the wider the screen, the larger the number. And so, for instance, 08 or 08 is a screen to the right, and it's an outside screen. And then we would we would use some designators in relation to who we wanted into the screen, and we had some base rules for it. This is going to become really significant, though. Even though it's just a double digit, you're going to see some triple digit numbers come up, and how we can actually somewhat gain some benefit, or we felt like we could, in the sense that we're calling the play over and over and over again, and the defense is not just hearing 08, they're hearing 708, 808, and then all of a sudden they're hearing 508, but they're thinking the play is the screen, that it's 08, when the reality of it is it might be something that's very complementary to it. And so as we move through this, I think that as we get to the fruition here at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those things where everybody can put this together.
And Coach, that's a tremendous point there. And to give a little more clarification, basically each one of these numbers in pairs kind of designate a specific screen, as Coach mentioned there. So 0, 0, and 0, 1 could basically identify with a screen that's going to end up the middle. So you could have that be your tunnel screen. So if you wanted the receivers from the right side to run a tunnel screen right up the middle there, you could call 0, 0, right? Now bring the receiver from the right. The offensive line would know the communication happens at the line of scrimmage. And then that 0, 2, 0, 3 could be another pair of a different type of screen, slow screen, for instance, or you could have a slip screen with 0, 4, 0, 5, and that number keeps building up. And so each one is kind of designated. The offensive line knows exactly what their responsibility is per the number that they hear at the line of scrimmage, right there in front of the defensive line. So thought that was very unique, especially as we get to the end, we tie all these things together about all these different numbers there.
Yeah, I think if everybody will hang with us as we kind of go through these pairings, I think everyone's going to find this to be extremely simple to be able to kind of plug in. And more importantly, it's very simple for the players because there's some rhyme and reason behind where things are at.
No doubt. Well, I got to play up here right now. And so right now we're going to run a what we call a wave screen. Okay. And this for us was 08 and 09. And so we're going to run it to the right here. Coach, if you want to kind of talk us through it.
Yeah, obviously this is out of an empty. And again, whatever system you're in, it's this is just kind of some demonstrations. I think one of the interesting things about this is this ends up being a 4x1 and, creates a little bit different look from a defensive perspective. Again, this kind of goes back to our abilities to get in and out of formations that we talked about in our last session. But this is one of those screens to a very, very simple screen to where basically our receivers are blocking on, and we are trying to get our linemen out into it. We liked screens a lot because we played the SEC West, as you well know.
That's right.
It seemed like that was our while we were in the Sun Belt Conference, our second conference was the SEC, and we knew that we needed to get out on the perimeters.
Absolutely, and so you guys obviously can't hear what's going on the field, but the signals came from the sideline, and basically we told the quarterback that this play was going to be a 09 wave screen. We denoted which receiver would be, kind of cleared that communication up with that exact signal, whether that's X, H, Y, Z, or even B for the back. And that quarterback then turned around, looked at the offensive lineman and said, dummy number, which we'll get into here in a little bit, 09 or 08, in this instance 08. And at that point in time, those linemen look up, they know their responsibility, they're ready to rock and roll. And so with that being said, we were actually able to play relatively fast, and we could go really, really fast if we wanted to. So
yeah, we could go very quick, and we were trying to snap the ball at 25 seconds, and just kind of in our normal offense, really not in our hurry up. And so we could go very, very fast. And as you mentioned, all this was communicated to the group out there, the quarterback with hand signals, and then the quarterback was then echoing that with a 3-digit number.
Right. Well, let's slide into the next series, and so it's the same thought process that kind of applies here, but now you have all your zone runs, okay? And I just want to preface this before I hand this to Coach Berry here. We had all the different type of zone runs that we wanted to have. We didn't utilize outside zone that much, but we still had a number to represent that, just in case we wanted to be able to run that every now and again, which we did. And so basically every 0 and 1, 2 and 3, all right, in this instance, 10 and 11, 12 and 13, we were able to assign a specific play to that number there. So, Coach, if you want to kind of expand on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that obviously in today's football, everything, regardless of what you're running offensively, there's going to be some type of zone scheme that's going to be a part of it, because just nature of all the defensive movements. It's very, very hard to man everything up now because the defenses have gotten more complex, and thusly everybody had to go zone scheme. And as you mentioned, this is our teen series, so this is 10 through 19. Obviously, the smaller the number, the closer the gap is, to the ball, and the larger the number means that the ball is getting outside. I think this play is actually going to be a 13, and so for all intents and purposes, this was an inside run. This was inside zone, to where 14 and 15 was more that middle zone. We might be able to add an addendum to that. 18 and 19 was in the wide zone, the stretch play. And so everything was kind of built along those lines. It helped the offensive line to understand that every team was going to be a zone, so they knew that it was going to be a zone. And then obviously the second number basically told the gap or the hole that we were trying to hit.
Yeah, Coach, I love that you kind of explained that real quick with the 12 and 13, 14, 15. Then somehow you skip 16 and 17, you go to 18, 19. Now, I've had the great opportunity, as you guys know, listening to the previous episode and different podcasts from us, that I had the great opportunity to coach with Coach Berry, both as a running back coach and receiver coach. And I'm really pointing out that 16 and 17 in this instance was free. Although over the course of our years, we used 16 and 17 whenever we would run across a zone scheme that might work for that particular week. We're facing some 4 eyes. We want to be able to run the zone scheme up front and do something unique on the backside. We were able to kind of plug some of that stuff in. Would you kind of talk about maybe how that popped up at times?
Yeah, you're right. Is the sense that there was time frames in that season, whether it be personnel or scheme, that we felt like that we really didn't need to run that play very much, if at all,
right,
during the course of that season. To where, as you'll recall, I skipped over to 10 and 11.
Absolutely, yep.
And there was a time frame when 10 and 11 was much more important to us than 12 and 13.
Yep.
And it was a little bit based off the back. It was a little bit based off of the scheme and the direction that we were wanting to run plays. And so even though those were all zone schemes, and obviously the tightness of that zone, it kind of depended upon, and again, that's why you do this, right? I mean, that's the beauty of being able to plug something in real easily, because for our players, even though we might not run 10 and 11 that year, they might not have ever heard it. If you called it out, they'd go, okay, well, this is a tight zone, but it's still a zone scheme. And so I really felt like that by packaging these and bundling these things into series, and again, you're going to find out a little bit later on as we kind of talk more about how we could cover up the play actions off this, how this really kind of all ties together.
Absolutely. Let's check out this play once again. This is pulling from last week. This is two right Trey Yo. And we're going to run a little 13.
Inside zone again. So the line's all zoning to the left. This is a tight zone. potential quarterback here, quarterback read in relation to the edge player and whether the edge player wrong arms or not. And so this is a read play for us. You're going to see quite a few play actions come off of this, and how we numbered those allows for, I think, some disguise for the defense. They continue to hear 13-13 as the base run, and they're hearing that, and then all of a sudden, as we get into the play actions, it's going to become pretty apparent that this could be a pretty good way to disguise things.
Great, Coach. So now we've covered the screens with 0 through 9, covered zone runs with 10 through 19. Now let's take a look at some of our gap runs. And once again, this is going to get a little repetitive here for the next couple run series here, but we're basically taking five different schemes, not necessarily always 5, but all the way up to 5, and we're pairing them 0, 1 in this instance for gap runs. This was the 20 series, 2021, 22, 23. And for those examples, 2021 for us was trap, 22, 23 for us was power. Kind of just moved on as we went down the line here. And Coach, with this segment, since this is kind of along the same lines as those other ones that we've already discussed, I'd love to ask you, at what point in time do you find these gap runs that you fall in love with? Like, for instance, I know for us over the years, 24, 25 kind of changed from year to year. Sometimes
That's
it was, sometimes we use it for dart, and a few other years we use it for something like more of a fold scheme with the center blocking down and the guard pulling around. When do you take the time to maybe investigate schemes that you maybe want to implement? And I know you love power, you love trap, some of those things that kind of stay, but when did you take the time to kind of learn the schemes you wanted?
Well, as you well know, I was always fascinated with trying to crack the code, and that's basically from stealing from everyone else.
Right.
Mario, for us, and kind of what we did, trap was always going to be a base. It was a gap scheme. We were always going to run trap, whether it be with the running back or the quarterback. And then we were always going to run power. Those were two really non-negotiables. That was going to be a part of it. But a lot of times on gap schemes, and again, structured defenses and changes in style and how things fit together are always going to play a part in it. We were going to be much more of a zone scheme than a gap scheme type of team,
right?
Based off of what we'd recruited, and even some of the normal defenses that we would face on our normal schedule. And so we would leave those gap schemes open, as you might mention. But again, for our players, they recognize that always, whenever we called a 20 series play, that it is a gap scheme, that basically we are blocking back, and then we're going to try to create the extra gap with a puller. And so consequently, when we were adding a new play, let's say that we didn't run 26-27, and which is what you're getting ready to show here.
That's right.
that might not be one of our base things, but we could stick it in that week, and everybody just said, okay, well, it's a gap scheme, and we're creating the extra gap. Where's the gap going to be? 6 and 7 hole, and we can move forward with it along those lines. And so I think you've got a couple of gap plays here for us.
That's right. You prefaced that really well. It's two right do show, and we're going to run actually 27. And for us, this was counter. We didn't run counter a ton, but when we wanted to versus Hawaii, we saw some opportunities there as we were scouting the opponent that week, and we implemented it, and we were able to get some good runs off of it, and thank Lord for the flexibility to be able to implement it in, and the kids not blinking an eye with it.
Yeah, this was certainly not a base in the whole time frame we were ever together, because counter, it can be great against specific offenses, or specific defenses, or if you've got a great offensive line that are great pullers. We never found some of those kind of things, and so consequently, counter was not a huge play for us. But it has, there are moments to where it can be really, really good. As a matter of fact, I think we put it in this week.
That's right.
Right? I mean, this is not something that it was just for this week.
Yeah, it was just for this week. We didn't carry it over to the next week. We just ran it this week. And as you can see here, we're able to get a little bit off of it. We were able to add some addendums, which we'll address in the next episode, in the next series. But it just gives you that next level of flexibility, just having those open numbers and being able to implement things as you like. And it all makes sense to the student athlete there. And so Here we're going to take another look at another gap scheme. Now, this was a little bit more traditional for us and getting creative with the formation here. So I do want to point that out. I think we are in depending on who the back was here. I can't recall. We got two of our backs in here in this wolf personnel, if you remember from last week, our 20 personnel look. So I forget which one was designated the back. Well, just for this purpose, we'll say this is two right, two Roy dot. Okay, two Roy dot, because now these guys are actually in extended splits up here. We're moving that apex player out of the way there, maybe that would like to add on to this power here. And so Coach, talk us through this power here.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the fact that you even said, I don't know which is the back, 2 or 3, we could adjust that based off of the blocker for that week or even for that series. Because, again, you might have an injury, you might have to rest a player, and you might want to change it. And I think it was really interesting, too, that you brought in kind of the Roy, right? Because that goes back to our last one. How do you get to the expanded splits? That's certainly expanded. And, for us, the Roy basically gave that our right Roy in relation to this. And this is power. This was always going to be something that we ran. We can certainly run it out of multiple formations. And again, it's a complete gap scheme type of thought process. So everybody's plugged into that. I think one of the other things too is there were, and today's probably not the day to get into it, there were some kind of specific things for a quarterback that were tied into the package. So they knew, for instance, on zone schemes, there was this thought. And on gap schemes, there was this overriding thought. It was going to impact whether they wanted to audible out of a play or whether they wanted to stay in the play. It was going to impact whether there were some reads for him that were a base point on it. So there were some other attachments that were more little nuances for our quarterback, which our offenses were very much quarterback driven, to where they had to do a little bit of thinking, but trying to minimize the thinking for, quite honestly, the majority of the rest of the offense.
No doubt. And one of the things I do want, I know this is a little bit more towards last week. Coach made the mention of that Roy versus right versus R, being able to fix those splits for those receivers. Now, we could very easily maybe throw RPO on this or something like, or a bubble, all right, something like that to hold this guy out here. But I like the fact that we simply, rather than having this number 2 guy lined up, a yard inside the hash, him at yard bottom of the numbers with the ball here on the left upright, we just went ahead and went that Roy route. Look at what that does to his split. And then on the power play, this guy does make the tackle, but rather than making it right here, just that simple shift of that formation extends the play and extends the run for us.
Well, you're actually creating an extra gap. And most of the time, we've always kind of felt like in football that you create an extra gap by bringing a lineman in.
Right.
But not in today's football. In today's football, because of the ability to be able to run all the screens and that idea that you just mentioned, they had to keep 3 people out there on our 2 receivers.
Right.
We had good matchups that week in relation to our 2 receivers against 2 defensive backs. Right. They couldn't risk it, and so they put the 3 on 2, and so thusly we basically created an extra gap just with the split.
No doubt. All right, Coach, we're going to transition here to the next scheme, and this one was a little bit more minimal for us, but we did leave these numbers open just in case we needed to add anything down the road. But one thing that was pretty consistent over the years was that we would run draw, and we counted that as a man run. So just explain to us what a man run is, and talk to us a little bit about this man series, the 30 through 39.
Yeah, 30 through 39 was man schemes, and so consequently, if you were an I formation team, you might get into a lot of these big on big type of schemes with lead blockers with the fullback and some of those kind of things. So 30 schemes for us, because the nature of what offense we were in at this point in time, doesn't mean that I wanted to be able to transition the offense, as you well know, based off of our personnel,
right,
and make it simple. And so if all of a sudden we ended up being more of a 2-back team or an I formation team, I would use more of these 30s. And again, these are man schemes, and so I think you might have draw here that's coming up. But this, when we got into some of our goal line short yardage, these plays would pop up a little bit more in relation to belly plays and some of those kind of things, lead plays. And so that was all in the 30 series, and that basically kind of put big on big, if you want to get right down to it. It was a man type of scheme. I've got this guy, and then we're going to try to insert somebody else into the bubble or let the quarterback, in this case here, because it's an empty formation and there is no linebacker, we don't necessarily need to have someone always assigned a gap, and because they don't have someone in the gap. So the 30 scheme is man. It's difficult with the man schemes right now with all the stunts, the twists, some of those kind of things that can create some problems. It basically turns things into zones. And so one of the reasons why we would get into some man schemes, especially into empty, was because the nature that it cleaned up the box.
Absolutely. Well, you may mention here we went a different route and went empty, and just for you guys, once again, coming off last week, we got the back located at the bottom of the screen. So this is an 8 right dice for us. All right. And we're able to run 30, and we actually put a quick route concept onto this to allow for the quarterback to make the best play that he can here. Coach, if you want to talk about this draw a little bit.
Yeah, obviously we've got a full removal. The box is clean. We knew that we were going to get this. And so this is one of those, really, quite honestly, it's an easy easy call in relation to the draw, and we looked at numbers. But this is an RPO too, as you mentioned. Draw plays are one of the best RPOs there are in relation to these empty sets because, as you mentioned, there is a route structure that is attached to this. And so our quarterback could either throw the quick route structure, and which we'll get into, I think, in the next episode, of how we could basically kind of combine different route structures really easily to create this really unique passing game. But in this case here, he saw that he had an empty box, and so take what the defense gives you.
Okay, so I'm really excited about this next series right here. We did this all throughout my course of time there at ULM. Didn't do a ton of it, but every game we'll have 1 or 2 of these option plays. And now this gets a little unique here because it's going to tie back into our zone runs, and I don't want to hog all of the attention here in describing this. So I'm going to let you kind of explain how these marry up, and we're going to check out a couple clips here.
Yeah, the 40 series was, as you mentioned, it was basically a zone scheme up front from our offensive line, and we would be able to attach those numbers. They'd recognize that number is where the ball was located. And so, for instance, 42 would be this, again, tight zone.
Right.
Tight zone blocking for them. But 40 series for us now is carrying forward to the quarterback and the back in the sense that we're going to have full flow. Traditionally, as we watched earlier, the 12 and 13 play, for instance, or 18 and 19 being the stretch play, you would have the quarterback read on the backside. And when I say full flow, you're going to see the quarterback and the back both go outside. And so this is a zone scheme. I believe this is going to be 48. And so our quarterback is basically, this becomes a loaded option, if you will. We're going to block everybody to the side. And if there's an extra hat, then that's going to be the quarterback pitch. And so this becomes technically speed option. If that guy wasn't blitzing, then now our quarterback is still kind of reading the edge, and he becomes the inside runner or a pitch, depending upon how the perimeter. So this in this case, because of the blitz, it ends up being speed option. We knew that we were probably going to get this look. And so once again, it becomes speed option, leave that guy unblocked there. And obviously a good gain. I grew up in an option type of background. My initial, when I was cutting my teeth as a coach, it was in the option. And so there was always going to be some option component to it. And this one's obviously very, very simple for the quarterback and really clean pitches many times, where some options can be a little trickier in relation to trying to get that relationship between the back and the quarterback. This one was easy, and we were not going to be, as you mentioned, a huge option team, but we were always going to have it a couple of them a game.
Right. Once again, the great purpose to kind of have these series, so whenever you have the opportunity to get to something, you can. And so just to reiterate formation for us here, we're in 2 left deuce zip. And that zip, we didn't talk about that last week, but that's just motioning that Z receiver in towards the tight end there. And we're able to lock the box up good and get the ball on the outside and maybe get a good gain off of it.
Yeah, and the eye candy obviously was just the zip motion, trying to get the defense's attention
right
to that other side, even though we weren't going to run the play that direction. It's just to try to move eyes a little bit, slow that other side down to hopefully slow the pursuit down.
No doubt. Great gain here. And so you guys mostly have seen speed option. And this is where it got really fun to me, especially as we go back and talk about how this married up to our zone runs. And so, to give you a really good example here, Coach did make mention of 42 and 43. Now, just think back to a little bit earlier in the video here. We talked about 12 and 13, that inside zone mentality where that you're thinking more A-B gap, and those linemen's path are a little bit more vertical rather than horizontal. And once again, I'm gonna let Coach kind of talk about this here. But before I hand it over, I'm gonna discuss the formation. It's two right trio is a formation. Now, Coach, would you explain this 42 play here we're about to see?
Yeah, again, it's inside zone as you mentioned, except the quarterback's running it, but it is full flow with the back going the same direction. And we did this against teams that we knew that were going to be playing man coverage, because all of a sudden that front side linebacker, who more than likely has the back man to man, is going to run out with them. And that's really, if it was zone coverage, that would be our read for our quarterback.
Right.
Is, does that linebacker stay inside? And if he stays inside, then I can go ahead and pitch it, knowing that I have numbers to the outside. So yeah, this is 42 and 43. And you'll see the line basically running inside zone. You can see the linebacker and how he's impacted by the back running out. And so we've basically, once again, kind of created that extra gap.
I thought this was so unique, especially as we got creative in terms of how we moved the tight end around. Right here, he's doing something we call set. We were able to run maybe a 44 and 45 series and insert them a little bit and just change up all these different schemes. You had these defensive guys running all over the place. The quarterback was able to get some nice short yard runs on these plays that, are options. They're truly option plays. He definitely can pitch it, but end up inserting inside a little bit more.
Yeah, and this could have been one of those ones that if you saw, and this ends up being a zone look, but if you knew that you were going to get man, and that linebacker was, for instance, attached to the tight end, this would have been a really good call for that too, right? Because then you've got that linebacker running backside, but instead of running 42, you might want to run 48, extend it out, because of the nature of where the tight end is. And as you mentioned, we did have some addendums that we could put on to 42 basically would have, and this is 42 set. If we just said 42, our tight end would have arc released. We'd have blocked the linebacker.
Right.
But because we called set, that tells him to go backside, and we had a couple terms in terms of the addendums. But again, everything's kind of compartmentalized. So we had lots of control over those, some of those individuals that could be inserted in different ways, such as a tight end.
Absolutely. Well, that covered our run game pretty good, and these things are all going to pop up here. Once again, when we start getting into some of our play action stuff. But before we do that, we're going to take a dive into some of our drop back stuff. And so now we went zeros, went 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, right on time for the 50s. And this is pretty point blank. I think this is the one thing I feel a lot of offenses use this terminology. But we were able to do something a little bit more unique with that second number from a pass game standpoint. But our 50 series is our 5-man protection, Coach. If you kind of want to talk about that there a little bit.
Yeah, 50 series for the quarterback is he knows he's got 5 men protecting. And so there is some recognition about whether, and we're going to talk about this here in a moment, about the back being in the backfield. And so, again, 50 protection for us would basically tell the quarterback that it's 5-man protection, and he's going to be hot to his right. Okay? 51 would be hot to his left. Now, we didn't use a lot of the other numbers inside, but we have, as you'll see later on, we do have a little bit of an ability to be able to kind of manipulate those numbers inside. The 50 is right, 51 is to the left, tells quarterback where the hot is. We know where the 5-man protection is. We know which way the center is going to turn in relation to 50, 51, because he's always going to go opposite the back unless the quarterback moves him. So these are going to be base concepts for us in relation to how we're not going to get into how we call all the different combinations that we could call from a pass game standpoint, which was very easy for our receivers. But for our line, this is 50, 51. And again, for our quarterback, they know which side the hot is.
Right. And I think it's important to note, and you kind of mentioned it there, we spent a lot of time in empty. And so being able to have the utilization of that 50 and 51 versus a 58, 59, although it told a lot to the quarterback, it also let the lineman know, hey, man, my back is either in the backfield or not. And it was such a huge key as far as how they're looking at the box, looking at their portion of protection.
Yeah, as we mentioned, the hot for in this situation here, this is 50 because the back is to the right. And, as a quarterback, we never wanted to turn our protection to the side because we wanted that back to have a clean release.
Right.
And so that was really, really important here too in relation to it. And later on, we'll get into 58, 59. There's certainly a lot more opportunities for the quarterback to turn the protection to wherever the blitz structure that is or whichever side his throw is.
All right, we got a little two. We're actually going to Z to right deuce, okay? So
right now it's two right over and
yeah.
And
so we're going to motion this receiver over, and that's going to create our right deuce, D being the 2x2.
Yeah, and once again, this is a 50 protection so that we know that we're hot. A little shallow cross series, and so for our quarterback, it was this was pretty easy. We get a little bit of a rub, but anytime that we were running shallow cross and linebacker came from inside, then we knew the shallow cross was displacing that area, and we would just basically dump it down to the shallow cross. If we had an outside perimeter blitz, then our back would become the hot here. So just, pretty easy football here in the sense that the linebacker blitzes, and so we basically throw into that replaced area, and obviously we have the spider web that's being created with the restricted split and all the receivers and everybody kind of going different ways, that if you're going to man it up, gets a little difficult. Natural rubs to develop off of it.
Absolutely. I'm happy you mentioned that. I know we're not getting too deep into some of the schematic parts of what's going on in the plays, but I do love that restricted. I mean, that's a bunch set, right? That's a three by bunch set, but not necessarily.
And into the boundary.
And into the boundary, that's right. So
yeah, which is a little even more difficult for the defensive structure because formation ends up in the boundary.
Now we made a little mention of 58 and 59 here. So, Coach, if you want to kind of take over that.
Yeah, 58 and 59 is still 5-man protection. We're just basically saying the back's now out. He's in empty, thus the 8 and 9. And I think he actually might be in an 8 here. This looks like it might be 8 right dice. And so in this case now, the quarterback does know that he needs to be able to move the protection. It doesn't look like he's going to need to, but from a base structure standpoint, we'll see kind of how this thing kind of plays out. But we might have a pressure here based off that outside linebacker to the field. We might end up with a pressure there, and we'll see how this thing kind of plays out. But he might need to move the protection to the side. If we said 58, it's going to basically say that the center, hey, we want you to turn to the right, the even number, pardon me. And if the quarterback wanted to move it, then we could just basically make a directional call if all of a sudden we wanted to move it to the left.
Absolutely. Let's check it out. There's the pressure.
There's the pressure. Line does a good job. They obviously, the protection was turned that way, as you can see. So the quarterback did a nice job with that. And again, just another little cheap dump down, which you can get an awful lot of these in empty. These were, some very, very easy yards. They don't all have to be big plays. They need to be 8-yard plays for us. One of the things that we always used to tell the receivers is the fact that the first 5 yards are the coaches. In the sense that you catch the ball and you get us 5 yards. And then after that, you can, dance and do whatever you need to try to make a big play, but you're going to make sure that you give us 5. And that was the assumption that most likely the throw was going to give you 5. And so, yeah, if you give us 5, then more than likely we have another first down.
Absolutely. So now, Coach, this is going to move us into our 60 series. All right. And just now we're more into drawbacks, as I mentioned. So this is going to turn us into our 6-man protection. If you want to kind of talk about that a little bit, Coach.
Yeah, it's pretty simple to that point. This is 6-man protection. So our back is basically going to be to the right. So he's going to create the 3-man triangle to the right. And then our center, left guard, and left tackle are going to create the 3-man triangle to the left. That, will handle almost most structures in terms of blitzes. And so you can pick up everything. So you can generally extend the routes. There's no need to check out or warm these routes. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that there might not be the need. But also in this case, if for whatever reason we were getting a field fire zone or a 4-man pressure, which is unlikely in this formation, but let's say we were getting a 4-man pressure from the field because we were in a 3-by-1, then at that point in time, the quarterback then could turn the center Again, just using that same directional call that he used earlier on the empty. So 6-man protection. We're big to the side. This is a 4-man to a side, believe it or not. So because you're going to see those 4 rushers, and so they're kind of in an all-out zero blitz. Back picks it up. We're always gonna, and he picks up the inside guy, as you can tell. Quarterback does not move the protection because he's got 3 guys to the bottom of the screen, 4 guys to the top of the screen. We were always going to turn the man furthest outside loose. And so in this case here, it's the outside rusher to the field side.
Now, I talked about one of the unique parts here regarding that second number, right? The in the last series, 50-51, 58-59. And now one of the things that just been a former running back coach for you, I know we were able to do 64-65. We had a video versus Texas A&M. I think we were playing Miles Garrett on one of the last clips there, and been able to play some of these top tier defensive ends. You want to be able to sometimes chip that in after that running back check releases on the 60 protection, and so just throwing it out there that we were able to go 64-65, and if we wanted to do something more creative, you still have these numbers regarding your protection in ways you can kind of create some chips and some bumps and things like that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the fun parts about it, and recognizing that if you are in a 6-man protection, I think this is 3rd and 9. You want to make sure that you're not having to throw it quick. Basically, you want to be able to protect long enough to get a first down.
Right.
And as you mentioned, some of the people that we played against, that made it a little difficult. So if the defense just basically blitzed, then it would be normal 60 protection.
Right.
60-61. But as you mentioned, if we tagged 64-65, then we were wanting our back, if the linebackers dropped out, we were wanting them to chip that defensive end. If we said 62 and 63, didn't happen as much unless we were going to insert the back. But dadgum, we played against some 3 techniques sometimes that were some rascals, and we wanted to chip that guy. And so we would try to run the back through. And again, the 60 protection allows for us to actually run this route, which I think I didn't notice it a lot, but I think this might be chain. So the receivers are basically trying to get to the chains and then stopping. And so that we're at that point thinking that we might get some pressure, that we can get the first down.
Absolutely. And the last thing to add on here, from once again from our old running back coach perspective, we were also able to line us back up, as we mentioned. He's in a 2 location here, and we were also able to throw a 61 on it. Just have this guy cross check. It wasn't a play action by any means, but sometimes I would be able to hold it back or something like that with him coming across the formation. And once again, just having that numbering system made that a little easier to do.
Yeah, I think it's important, quite honestly, because I think that ability to be able to cross the back over to the opposite side. There are people, defensive structures, that do want to blitz the back side, thinking that the majority of the time the back is going to stay to that side. And especially in a 5-man pressure, if all of a sudden you cross the back over, you're opening your center up to be able to handle those 3, and now you can get your back out, even though they're bringing 5, rather than trapping your back in.
Absolutely. Well, just moving forward here now, we're still in drop back, but we're going to get into a 7-man max protection. All right. Emphasis on max is the back and the tight end are going to make sure that they stay in here. So don't know if there's much to add on that, Coach, but if you got anything, please add on.
Yeah, these are 7-man protections, as you mentioned. Right. The 7-man protections more for us were gap schemes. We use these to be able to push the ball down the field, obviously, because you're protecting with 7. And so basically everybody was going to protect their gap.
Right.
And so now we did have the ability to be able to free release the back at times because we knew we were keeping the tight end in. And for the most part, this was used in these situations in the red zone where you think that you might be getting some pressure and you just want to give the quarterback enough time to get the ball off. And I actually think, if I recall, this one might be one of kind of my favorite concepts down here.
Absolutely. So we're in this 2 Roy Treyo.
Yeah, it started off in right Treyo. Well, it didn't really. The inside receiver basically looked at it like that. And then obviously it goes to Roy instead of right. Outside receivers are already in Roy. And we're looking this, seeing if we have the pressure or the coverage that we're wanting. And we get it. still switch route. Switch, obviously, there's some natural rubs that are a part of this, and but this would just be as zone concept. They'll switch, run and shoot switch route.
Right. Receiver does a good job of running through the inside shoulder, and with the extended splits, you get a lot of green grass.
Back is able to help the tight end here a little bit because the guy comes, outside the tight end, and so the tight end kind of moves on out. But you've got, obviously, there are all the gaps protected there on the seven man protection.
All right, Coach. Now we talked about on majority of these series where you had 2 or 3 numbers that might be free depending on the series. Now we actually had majority of the time I was there at ULM. I know I was there. You were there, and I wasn't a year or two. So maybe before I got there, you guys may have utilized the 80s and 90s series. But there was 2 series we didn't utilize while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
But they still denoted something. The 80 series was a 7-man protection, like you just saw, but it allowed for the back or tight end to check release after their assignment is done. And then your 90 to 99 series allow for you to sprint out, which I know you mentioned that you sprinted out a little bit more in the past, early on in your career. So just we obviously don't have film to watch those clips, but just what was the importance of making sure that you maintain having those in your back pocket?
I just wanted something, as we kind of talked to with the 30 series died for us because I wasn't in the I formation anymore.
Right.
I wanted something that was going to carry through the years, and so that it was something our players and coaches could hold on to and know and learn. And so both those ones that you just said, we did use our 80s and 80 series a little bit when I first got to ULM. We needed to be able to protect the quarterback a little bit more at that point in time. But we never got into the 90 series, and I used to be a big sprint out guy, but there were some things that sprint outs were creating some problems with in terms of blitz structures and how we were warming. It just really didn't fit with kind of where our quarterbacks were. We started using play action more. But you're right, I didn't all of a sudden just dump it because, a couple years down the road, I might need that series. And so we kept that in, and even though we didn't have any plays in it.
Right. All right, so now this is when this thing's going to all start really coming together here. We're going to get into our 3-digit series, all right? And this is going to make a lot of sense about how we communicate at the line of scrimmage here. And so our first 100 series is our 100s, and this is a pocket play pass. And I'm going to let Coach kind of describe everything else and how this marries to some of our earlier run game stuff.
Well, I think this was a good setup, what you said, because I think it provides the decoy that we kind of talked to earlier. When we got into the 100s, that was basically the play action off of a run. And so I think this first one here is going to be 112. And how we communicate this, again, we use the 3-digit numbers as we kind of talk to. Early on, our quarterbacks, when we were around 12 and 13, they would call this at the line of scrimmage 6-12, 7-12, 8-12, 9-12. All of those were done. That first number was a dummy number. And so consequently, you're running 12 an awful lot, but you're hearing 6-12, you're hearing 8-12, you're hearing 9-12. And then all of a sudden you get up and you hear 112. Well, if you're the defense, you just heard 12. And so the thinking now that it's inside run, but once again, this is the true play pass instead of a naked or something along those lines in terms of the 112. And again, you can you can put any kind of combinations you want on the outside.
And the big denotation here is this is a pocket play pass. So a quick flash fake from the quarterback. He's not going anywhere.
That's correct.
You're getting mainly all the same blocking assignments here. I think this is actually 14.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry.
14,
yeah, it is.
15.
This is 114, 115 because the tight end's inserting.
Right. So
yeah. And interesting enough, too, for the line, their responsibilities are the same as 60-61
right
protections.
Absolutely.
And but they're firing off the ball a little bit. They're not in a drop back type of mode. So they're really not learning a new protection. It's the same protection. It's just a little different technique.
Absolutely. And the back giving a kind of that token fake. Your tight end's inserting, and your quarterback's doing that quick flash. But the influence it's still having on these backers is pretty significant and able to create a nice little window for you.
Yeah.
Versus a just typical drop back.
Correct.
And so just to note, we only have one snap of this, although I have a ton in my cut-ups. We were able to go 112, 113, as mentioned, 114, 115. We were actually able to run into our gap series, so you would see actual pullers. We run our 120, 121s with our trap look, our power
Absolutely.
look. So
Yeah, you're basically just running the run play and just
right,
making sure linemen don't go downfield.
absolutely. Now, let me ask you this question here, Coach, and this maybe be helpful for anybody that's kind of falling in love with what they're seeing here. At what point did you ever feel uncomfortable with maybe calling a 114, 115? As you mentioned, this is very similar to what the lineman will be doing versus the 60s. Like, at what point would you say, hey, you know what, this defense is doing something where I just feel a lot more comfortable calling 60s here versus the 114, 115?
Well, I think anytime that you're running play action where you're in the pocket, you're really wanting to run that where you're going to have influence on every eye. And so from the lineman standpoint to the linebackers to even the secondary. And so you really kind of want to run it against zone. If you're getting a lot of man, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense in relation to impacting the defensive back's eyes. Their eyes are on the receiver.
Okay.
And so consequently, there was not a lot of reason to get into the 100s. You might as well just throw it. But you could still influence the defensive line with as you mentioned, a 120 to where all of a sudden it was blocked like trap. And then all of a sudden they were having to try to wrong arm, even in a blitz structure in terms of the gap. And so traditionally our 100s were against more zone teams, more teams that we could basically influence all the eyes rather than just a few.
Absolutely. And I do want to add this. Me and Coach, as we talked before this, we weren't going to really talk much about what we call flash flow. And we've talked about it a little bit on our quarterback series thing. But with that one, with those gap scheme runs, and even with some of our zone scheme, we could get these guys running, lateral across the field, across that quarterback, and giving that power read look. And we really could get guys running downhill, side to side, and be able to take advantage of some of those gaps behind those guys.
Yeah, the terms flash and flow, which I know we're going to get into at another time, that was when we discovered that back in 2004. And again, we won't get into how it came about. We'll maybe later on we'll say how all of a sudden this whole thing matriculated into what it is now. But yeah, it was a game changer for us, and even in the play actions.
Right.
Flash and flow really created some really unique things for us.
All right, Coach. Well, let's transition here to our next series, the 200 series. Once again, explain how that kind of correlates with some of our more zone runs here. But I know we did do some gap runs once or twice in the course of being with you. But if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is the 200 series is basically running the play. In this case, I do believe it is going to be 213. And so we're going to run the play 13. But now our quarterback's going to move out of the pocket. So it's going to be a naked. And so the quarterback has to understand that he does need to have that he's going to have to clean this thing up for himself. Most of the route structures are going to allow for some pretty quick dump downs in case the edge player decides not to bite on the fake and decides to come inside. We got into a lot of this, and this is the reason why we didn't run a lot of sprint outs, because I felt like this was a better way to be able to move the quarterback to the perimeter and still be able to hold people's eyes back inside. We can do this out of a lot of different formations, and for those people that watch the two quarterback system, it really got really interesting for us. This 200 series did
Right.
for us in relation to all the different things that we can do. So this is going to be 213, and again, you can run lots of different combinations on the outside. One of the things that we did that was kind of interesting for us, and we're not going to get a great picture of it here, but because it's the inside zone, our back was going to take a relatively tight track, but we actually put him into a little shovel. So he would basically dive up in there, and then he would kind of shovel back. And that way, if the quarterback did get some edge pressure that he wasn't comfortable with and didn't have a clean throw, then he could basically just pitch it back to the back on a little shovel course. And that's, again, if the edge player came up, we are seeing some pressure here. And so thus the quarterback doesn't have that kind of clean pocket to the outside that he might normally get off of a normal play action, a normal naked. So this was 213. Defense has been here in 13-13, 7-13, 8-13, 9-13 all day long. We talked about the last one. All of a sudden was 113. Now he could basically be in the pocket. And now 213 is going to say, okay, well, now it's not the run. but he's not in the pocket either. He's going outside, but the defense is still hearing the same numbers.
Absolutely. And what were some of the other things? I know that what you did with the 200s was a little bit more limited than what maybe with the 100s, but just to kind of help the coaches out, once again, might be falling in love with this stuff. 212, 213, those are your inside zones. 218, 219.
Absolutely. If you're, if you're running more outside stretch and you want to go 218, 219, then you do that. If you're running more insert, then you can go 214, 215. Again, the 200 number just basically told the quarterback is we're running the play, but we want you to escape opposite the call side. So 219, quarterback's going to fake 19, then roll out to the right, kind of like it looks just like read zone, but except obviously read stretch in that case. Now, because the quarterback is working out again and he is naked, our route combinations really didn't change that much. We had several, as you know, and we could do it out of multiple formations, which made it great. But it really didn't change much in relation to the thought process between 213 or 219 along those lines, other than the quarterback recognized that he didn't have his back as a drop-down shovel.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to transition into the 300s, and anytime there was opportunity for that mental trigger, I know we always tried to utilize that. Hence, 5-man protection was the 50 series, 6-man, 60 series, 7-man, 70 series, and so now you got this 300, right? And this is your 3-step trigger, right? Your 3-step drop trigger, and how this correlate with your quick game. And so just like your 100s, 200s kind of worked in conjunction with your zone runs and gap scheme runs, and even at some points times I know we actually used the 100s with our man schemes. Let's talk a little bit about how these 300s tie into our protections.
Yeah, as you mentioned, when we first started off with this offensive style and the system, and it's carried for almost 30 years. 300s was always 3-step drop. Thing is we're not underneath the center anymore. That was but it kept carrying forward, right? It's basically just meaning that it's quick,
right?
And then you're going to just attach the 3 to whatever protection you want. So if you said 350, then our back would be in the backfield, and we would be running 3-step with the back in the backfield. If you said 358, okay, then that would say to the quarterback, hey, we're an empty, we're still 5-man protection, and we're throwing 3-step. If we said 360, that's keeping the back end of block a linebacker, but we are running, again, 3-step drop route structures, and 370 and so on. You can continue on down. So basically the 3 just said, offensive line, this ball's coming out. Receivers, we're going to have quick game routes attached to this, and then we can plug in any protection that we wanted.
Absolutely. Well, let's check this out. We're in the empty, so this should trigger if we're drop back like normal, this would be a 58 or 59, but we're going to make this a 3-step. So you're looking at a 358 or 359. Your back's in an 8 location up top, so you're in 8 right dice. And if you want to kind of talk about everything else, Coach, that'd be great.
Yeah. I think it's going to be 358. It doesn't look like we're getting any pressure to begin with, and then all of a sudden we get this extended pressure from outside. This is one of the perfect times to throw quick. And the reason being is because the fact that we probably expected pressure, they're not showing it, and this is going to end up being a zone pressure. It looks like more than a man pressure, but there's no chance in a 3-step that outside backer coming from that proximity even has a chance to get to the ball. And as we kind of talked in the quarterback thing, so much of why we got into empty was because some of the mismatches up front in the offensive line, but also just this ability to be able to say, for a young quarterback, this is a freshman quarterback that's in there right now, son, where's the grass? And this becomes backyard football at that point in time. Pretty easy to get a quarterback to understand where there's some grass to hit, and is there anybody that's moving into that area from a route structure standpoint. And you can see he's even looking outside here to begin with, and all of a sudden he comes back inside because he goes, okay, there's the grass. And, nice, easy throw, easy catch for a freshman quarterback.
All right, Coach, so you talked a little bit about that 358 look. And so we can marry these up with different protections. So I wanted to make sure we had different types of 300s here. Mm-hmm. So now you're sitting in 3 left Trey-O formationally. And we're going to stay in a 7-man protection. So if you want to talk a little bit about what we got going on
Yeah,
here.
so this is going to, if it's a 7-man protection, obviously that's a 70 call. And so in order to get to the quick part of it, it's basically going to end up being 370, just alerting the receivers that we are, ball's going to come out faster because of the route structure, and that we're going to keep the 7 guys in, but hey, line, this is going to be quick protection. The difference here, you obviously have a senior quarterback, and I mean, the back shoulder throw. Yeah, this is really, really nice back shoulder, perfect location on it, and the difference between a senior quarterback and a freshman quarterback, and in terms of just kind of finding some matchups rather than just grass.
And I love to piggyback off you here, Coach. Once again, been your receiver guy, particularly this year. Having that 300 trigger is so huge because this guy right here has a go route, but and having that 300 trigger, look how early his eyes get back.
Yeah,
I mean, and so this is just in sync, and it's that quick trigger. He didn't talk to the quarterback before this play because we don't huddle up, right?
right.
And so just hearing that 300 trigger, eyes are around, ready for the back shoulder.
Yeah, and as we can always talk about with the secondary players and how fast the ball needs to come out. If you're the quarterback, you're saying, is this defensive back looking at me, or is he looking at the receiver?
Right.
And obviously in man coverage, most of the time he's going to be looking at the receiver, but you can even get some of that in zone based off the technique and the depth, eyes, and leverage of that defender. But the moment that the defender goes blind to you, then he's gone blind to the ball if I'm the quarterback. And so I can make that throw very quickly because he never has a chance to play it, right? He never has a chance to see it.
Right.
And so the ball can come out a little faster whenever they're blind to the ball.
Awesome, Coach. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about the 400 series. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, believe it or not. We're going to talk about the 400 series and once again how these marry up to the run actions, and I'll let you take over.
Very, very similar to the 200 series in the sense that we're actually asking the quarterback to move outside the pocket. But the 400 basically is going to tell the quarterback now that he's protected. So once again, I can insert any of my run calls, traditionally more zone calls, but you can insert any of your run calls into the 400 series. And that's just telling the quarterback that, hey, we're going to take care of the first man outside the tackle tight end box. And so in this instance, it might be 412, it might be 418, something along those lines. I'm probably anticipating that we're going to move the tight end here to the field side. While we would run these plays back into the boundary, especially at 200, very rarely we on these 400s, because we were protected, we actually wanted to be able to get the quarterback to really have lots of room to be able to maneuver so that we could stretch the field and have more balls being thrown downfield. So I'm assuming our tight end is going to move here to the field side, and this is going to be probably some kind of 418, 412 route structure. It looks like we're in a one location, which we weren't able to show the other day. But now we are in one left tray yo. We actually wide to it. And this is going to be a 418. Back's going to run the stretch play outside, and we've got our pylon call, so that'll allow us to stretch the field a little further. I'd like to get the ball out there a little further than what we did. Yeah, so again, we're just attaching the 400 to say, quarterback, we're going to protect you. Tells tight end, obviously, to protect. Line's still running 18. Now, they don't care if it's 218 or 418 to them. It doesn't make any difference to them. Doesn't make any difference to the receivers or to the back. This is really just letting the quarterback know that he's protected. Call it off any run play.
Yeah, just extended play action here. You're able to really get this guy downhill. And I know it's something we saw on film, that when these guys saw run, they'll get down pretty aggressively.
Yeah, and you'd think that the backside safety would also say, hey, I've got a drag route coming.
Right.
I need to work for some depth. And
yeah, as always, I remember being in the box on this play. That was what he had typically did on film, was drive down, and he did on this one. So luckily he didn't interfere with the play. But
It's hard for him to see that backside, especially based off the angle that we told that receiver to go to really get that involved. This was we ran this play. I've been running this play for 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's always been a winner for me.
Well, Coach, we're going to kind of close up shop here a little bit with this last series, and we're going to bring everything all together. So this last series is our 500 series, and I chose this place because with 500s we can pull from any of those categories. Where the 300s obviously you're pulling from protections, the 200s, 400s you're pulling from majority of those zone runs of that 10 category, and then with the 100s you're kind of in the 10, 20, sometimes 30s, and wanted to find something where you could pull from that screen series, and we were able to do that with our 500s.
Right.
So we're going to run that 09 wave or 08 wave is what you saw earlier versus Kentucky in that one of the first clips that we watched here today. But it's going to be 09 wave running up top. If you want to kind of talk a little bit more about the 500 series, Coach.
Yeah, the 500 series was our last series, as we kind of talked about. 600, 700, 800, 900 were always dummies, and so the quarterback could use those in the 3 digits. But the 500 was a play action, but it wasn't off of a run play. It was basically off of screens. We ran a lot of screens. And consequently, as you mentioned, this is off the wave screen, and it's basically telling our line, hey, we want to protect this thing. The receivers, we're wanting to run these these route structures, and so you've got the wave screen coming up top, and then if you'll notice, we have a different combination. We're going to get into that a little bit later on down here at the bottom, and that was to give the quarterback some dump offs in case for whatever reason he didn't like the front side, didn't want to hold on to the ball for that long to the field side. But we're faking the wave screen and just dumping it off. Like to see that outside receiver stay a little bit wider here than basically he's running the screen. He's showing screen.
Yeah.
But this was a little dump off down inside. And again, we wanted to be able to work off of our screens, and so 500s became that ability to be able to influence the defense with an action, but it wasn't a run action.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, as we close this up here, we gave a lot of information, a lot of great information for coaches to kind of chew on. And once again, this is the purpose of this whole series itself is for, in offensively or defensively, to look back at how you're communicating with your team, how you have your structure set up. Does it make sense as the season goes on? If you have something that you like, you want to throw it in. Does it all of a sudden just pile up to where things don't really make sense? And basically this structure allows for you to do so. And one thing I do want to add is, we talked about it at the line of scrimmage. The offensive lineman every play is hearing three numbers. That's it. They're hearing 3 numbers and they're ready to rock and roll. So they're going straight to the football. Quarterback is sending it to the left side, to the right side. I'm sure Coach maybe coach that up in a little bit more detail than that. But the quarterback came up, and if he wanted a play pass off the 114, let's say 114 to the left side, 114 to the right side. The receivers have seen the signals from the quarterback. Down said Hutton, we're off and rolling. And it was just that quick and just that versatile. So, Coach, as we wrap up here, you got any last things you want to pass off as these coaches kind of absorb this?
Yeah, I think last thing I would say is, I mentioned several times in this thing. This was from 20 years ago or 30 years. We've been running the system for a long time, so obviously you get comfortable with it. But that was kind of the point: is if you spend some time, as you just mentioned, on your infrastructure, on your system, on your setup, then it keeps carrying forward for you forever. I mentioned earlier that we were, 30 series was big when I was in the I formation. I'm not in the I anymore, but that series is still a part because we built it as a system rather than as an offensive style of play.
Right.
And so it's transitioned through the years for us really nicely. And obviously the things that you're seeing here are still even somewhat outside the norm.
Absolutely. And last thing to kind of piggyback off that, because I think it's so awesome, is that this same structure, you turn the film on, you would think that you would see the same type of offense show up on the field, but you're just seeing a downhill power run team 1 year based off personnel. You're seeing that empty slinging the ball around 60 times versus Wake Forest or Arkansas the next year. And so it still leaves room for that versatility. still allows for kids to kind of carry over whatever they knew from the year before to the next year. So there's not a ton of new learning for anybody, coordinator or kids, and still offers a ton of versatility.
Yeah, and I'm excited as we kind of move forward a little bit with this, is putting some of the other pieces together to where everybody sees that the amount of versatility that is a part of kind of and why this is important, because it does give you that versatility. And I think, again, I think that'll even be demonstrated more as we kind of continue on. We build on some of these other foundational building blocks that we have.
No doubt. Well, as always, thanks, Coach Berry, and we look forward to getting with you guys here next week.
Thank you, Mario.
All right.